thanks for taking time out of your lives and being here.
My truth to power is rural America is key to the energy future of the United States.
If you know anything about community organizing, we cannot speak for 5 minutes.
Native nation building is tribal sovereignty in action.
There's a train coming down the line, picking people up right on time.
And because I love this place, I'm gonna do something to make this place whole.
I really love the theme of this conference and assembly, building an inclusive nation.
Representative Benny Thompson, Rural Champion, for your untiring efforts to help rural people and communities, presented by the National Rural Assembly 2013.
A lot of my friends that I went through since middle school didn't know I was undocumented until my senior year.
If you close a school, and if you close a hospital, you close the town.
The president created the White House Rural Council as a reflection really of the types of things that you all have experienced here this week.
This assembly and the folks who are assembled here have done a remarkable job over the last several years, being the advocates, being the voice for folks who may not be as well represented in the halls of Congress and in state legislative bodies.
Less than 3% of all philanthropic dollars were being invested in the rural South, and particularly on issues and programs related to Black women and families in those areas.
But it also says something big about why I believe rural America is just got so much to offer all of America.
We needed to make a bigger case for investment in early childhood education from unlikely places.
Pickle jar, that's right. You know what else it is? It's a rural healthcare financing mechanism.
In community and in relationship with others, that we locate a self that we could never find being isolated.
There is something magical that happens when women gather.
As original people, we can't do this by ourselves. But our fight is your fight. It's not just mine.
It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Rural Assembly Everywhere. This is the first virtual gathering of the Rural Assembly.
It is truly an honor to be here with this group that cares so much about rural health.
You are welcome here. You who are multitasking. You who are powering through a hard day, a hard work, a hard year.
Welcome to the Road to Repair.
One of the worst things you can do to combat disinformation is to throw more information, at people and try to convince them with the sort of power of your facts and logic that you're right.
Too often, if it doesn't directly affect me, I don't feel urgency about pushing back. I don't feel urgency about getting loud. I don't feel urgency about advocating in the opposite direction. And so then the voices that end up dominating the policy narrative are the angriest voices.
And I appreciate what you do to build back connections in rural places.
Hi, friends. I'm Whitney Kimball Coe. I'm the director of the Rural Assembly and a vice president with the Center for Rural Strategies. I'm so happy to welcome you back to Everywhere. Everywhere is a virtual festival designed to celebrate rural experiences and to engage a diverse set of rural voices on topics that are top of mind for so many of us these days. Questions we're holding, like what makes our community safe and connected? How do we create more welcoming, inclusive environments? What is rural America's role in ushering in cleaner, greener economies? How are rural people tending to social and political divisions in our communities? A couple of months ago, we put out a call asking for your help engaging these kinds of questions, and you responded. You responded with videos, reflections, and even musical performances. So today's program is a compilation of your responses alongside a few special curated videos and conversations. It's my pleasure to introduce our first conversation, which is a very special interview conducted with Kentucky's Poet Laureate and award-winning author, Silas House. We invited Silas's good friend, the Right Reverend Brian Cole, now Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of East Tennessee, to facilitate a conversation with Silas about how we tend to people and places we love. I hope you enjoyed this conversation between Brian and Silas. And as always, please keep the Crowdcast chat lively with your thoughts and your questions and reflections. Enjoy. Thank you.
Silas, it is good to see you. The last time we saw each other, you were in Knoxville for the Lark Ascending book tour, and that was a great evening. But you've got even better news with this Poet Laureate of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and I'm just curious what it has felt like. I know you love Kentucky and claim it. What just has it felt like to be given this honor and this responsibility?
Well, it is. It's daunting, but I do feel really honored. I'm especially glad to have been appointed by a governor I really admire and respect, and a governor who his whole platform is about empathy, and he's a man of deep faith, and he's progressive, and his first appointee as a Poet Laureate was a Black woman named Krista Wilkinson, and his second one, me, is the first. I'm the first openly gay Poet Laureate of Kentucky. So he is a governor for all of us, and I appreciate that.
So I don't know at this point if you've had much time to start traveling as the Poet Laureate, but I'm curious, thinking about this theme for this gathering about communities and connection and safety. What's hurting right now in Kentucky in the places you're traveling?
Well, I mean, it is a fraught time for LGBT people. The Human Rights Campaign just named a national state of emergency for our safety. And so that is of concern. It is something that people are thinking a lot about. And I think it's one reason that it's more important to be a visible LGBT person who is out there as Poet Laureate and is out there as a writer, and who also, I like to talk a lot about being a multifaceted person. Sometimes I have to say I am a gay writer, or sometimes I have to say I am an Appalachian writer, or I'm a working class writer. I'm a person of faith and a writer, so I have lots of identities, and I like to think about the intersections and not just one of those, but just like I just said, sometimes, one of those takes relevance in a conversation. But I do think that being multifaceted like that and recognizing all those identities as being equal and what makes me a writer and a person helps me to, I hope, represent more people in my position as Poet Laureate.
I'm curious, as a person of faith, I'm aware that you've written about the rise of Christian nationalism. You've also written a lot about, and we've all experienced also in the state of Tennessee, the way in which anti-LGBTQ matters are so held up as sort of Christian values. I'm curious how you continue to claim your Christian faith in such a difficult time.
Well, again, I'll sort of reiterate the same thing, that I think it makes it even more important to talk about that, right? Because I do sometimes feel that Christianity has been hijacked by the loudest people in the room who have politicized it. And what a terrible thing to politicize people's faith. I just think it's terribly sad that that's been done. It's been weaponized. And so it's even more important for people of faith who do not have a political agenda behind their faith to speak up and to talk about their values. And I think for me especially, it's complex because I was raised evangelical and I was raised in a fundamentalist sect. A very strict, very controlled situation. And so I feel like, my journey from being raised evangelical to wandering alone in the wilderness for some years and trying to figure myself out, holding on to my faith, and eventually feeling, taken into the arms of the Episcopal Church, has, those challenges to my faith have made my faith stronger. To go back just a little bit to the containing multitudes, I think what you're saying goes right into something I think a lot about is, as wonderful as the internet is, and there's so many great things about the internet, but one of the things that I think has been the most terrible about the internet is how it has compelled us to think more in absolutes and less in complexity. It's made us sort of assign people to heroes or villains, and and to sort of, if you're not easily assigned into one of those categories, you just might as well not exist. And of course, most human beings exist in that gray. We're full of all kinds of different ways of being and notions, and we're not easily categorized. And so that's something that I think, as a novelist, I think a lot about. One of my jobs as a novelist is to explore that gray. It's to explore those complexities. If I have a one-dimensional character, then I failed. But our culture increasingly assigns us into one-dimensional roles. I also think that's concerning, but I also think it makes art even more important.
I'm curious, with the folks that are listening to you today, are there particular things you've written about place? Are there other folks who have written about place that you'd want to share with us today?
Well, I have one passage that I think anytime I'm asked that question, I always go to that passage. It's pretty short. Can I read it to you?
Sure.
This is
please.
From my novel, The Cold Tattoo, which is probably the novel of mine that is the most environmentalist. It's the most. It's the book of mine that is most a sort of a tribute to the land, and maybe even an elegy for the land. As I became increasingly aware of the climate crisis and things like that. But this little passage goes more to sort of the way rural people are negated and even erased from our culture and things like that. People were always going on about how you had to have some fun in your life, how you had to have adventures. But Easter had never wanted to be anywhere else but right here on Free Creek. She didn't feel an empty place inside herself because she had barely ventured out of these hills. She did, however, feel strange because she did not share the desires that the rest of the world seemed to have. She had never studied movie magazines and wished to be an actress, had never envied people on television. She thought about the people who drove through this county or flew by on the new highway without even realizing there was a whole town beyond the mountains on either side of them. If they saw this place, if they drove by Free Creek and saw her house with her sitting on the porch while she broke beans and her husband sat there drinking his beer, she knew what they would think. They would consider these people on the porch and wonder how they stood living such little lives stuck in a small town where nothing ever happened, a place where the stores closed at dusk and nobody famous ever came to speak or sing in a concert hall, a place where nobody important in their eyes had ever been born or lived. They would feel sorry for the people on the porch and the smallness of their existences, and be thankful that they themselves lived in places where there were fancy restaurants and tall buildings and jobs you had to get dressed up for. But her life did not feel little at all to her. And so I think, as soon as when I first became published and went out on tours and things of that nature, I was prepared for stereotypes, that people would have. But I think the thing that I was surprised by was how many people would say to me, "Oh, things must be so simple where you're from." And I would always be, "No, things are very complicated." And people have very complicated, busy lives. And, I grew up in a town of about 500 people. I was never, ever bored, ever. And I never wanted to leave. There's this escape narrative about the place. Now, at a certain point, I felt like I had to leave as the culture became more politically charged and things like that. But I never wanted to. And I live in Lexington now, about an hour and a half from where I grew up, and in a city. But I'm always homesick, and I'm always aware of how complicated rural lives are and working class lives are and things like that. There's nothing simple about it.
So I asked you earlier about where you see hurt in your communities. I'm curious about the places where you're seeing people stand up and do hopeful things. Are there folks in particular you want us to know about, either in actual people or places where you're seeing signs of some hope?
Well, one of the most moving things I've ever witnessed, I think, was when Breonna Taylor was killed and people were in the streets protesting night after night after night. I think they protested about 18 nights in a row in Lexington alone, where I was living at the time. But then you started seeing this happen all over rural Kentucky too. Breonna Taylor was a Kentuckian, and I think that just really spoke to a lot of people in Kentucky to just think she was Kentuckian like me. And so I saw people in the little town that I grew up in, which when I was growing up there, it was still considered a sundown town. That is a town where Black people are known to not be welcomed after dark. And that's something that people in my hometown have, been actively trying to change for decades. Of course, that doesn't mean in any way that racism is cured, or I don't mean to suggest that in any way. What I do mean to say is that there are people who want that to change, and they're working toward that change. And so to see people in my little hometown, which had been known all across the South as such a racist place, to be out in the streets marching for Breonna Taylor, it was really moving to see. And now, just the other day, there was a group of young people in my hometown who had a little pride rally. There were just about 12 of them, I think. And, they're just out there with their pride flags and their signs that are affirming people's lives and just saying, "I love you," and a really positive thing. And then a man comes up and pulls a gun on them, and cusses them out and talks terribly to them. Of course, in the news, all the focus is on that man. And it should be known that somebody is, pulling a gun on peaceful protesters. But I also want people to remember that there were 12 people out there who were holding those signs just to be loving forces, So little things like that give me a lot of hope. I still think it's difficult for a lot of people to be out in the streets of Knoxville or Louisville or Birmingham or Atlanta to, say, I'm out here as an ally or I'm out here as an LGBTQ person. But I think it's a whole other thing to do that in a small little town in Eastern Kentucky or East Tennessee or rural America. So I just have so much respect for that. And it also just gives me so much hope because that could not have happened when I was 21 years old, like these people who are out there doing it now. Well, we knew we couldn't do that.
You wrote an essay, a piece for the New York Times years ago that I've given to a lot of people about the art of being still. I'm just aware that thinking about the folks who are listening to us today, who are committed to rural communities, who are activists, who are doing social justice work, always the awareness of the ability to burn
Yes,
out,
Lord,
right?
yes.
You away. So I'm curious for you as a writer and as an artist, that need for stillness, that need for solitude as a way of fostering community, fostering creativity. Can you say a little bit about that to these folks maybe who are, again, have many, many things that they're trying to push back against right now, to think about how solitude and stillness might be some kind of medicine?
Well, I think, I had a novel that came out last year called Lark Ascending, and sort of one of a mantra that runs throughout that book is that to survive, you have to keep going. But also to survive, you have to sometimes be still. And so the solution there is that you have to strike a balance of you have to keep going, but you also have to take care of yourself. I always think about that thing that they tell you on an airplane, if you're traveling with somebody else and the mask drop, you have to put the mask on yourself before you can take care of the other person who's with you. It's the same thing if you're a part of social justice movement. You are out there because you want to take care of other people, or you want to take care of the land. You're fighting for the rights of people or the land or what have you. But you also have to take care of yourself in order to do that. And sometimes I think that we sort of think that it's selfish to take some time for ourselves, but you have to do it. It's or you'll just fizzle out. I was writing a lot about the environment, and it was in all my novels and my short stories and my poetry and all that. But then in 2005, Wendell Berry called me, and he said, I love what you wrote in The Cold Tattoo about the land and all this, but you're not out there doing anything about it. You need to be speaking up. And if you're willing to do that, I would like for you to go with me, and we'll do this. And well, first of all, if Wendell Berry asks you to do something, you're going to do it, or at least I am. I was just like, Wendell Berry, called me. That's all I was thinking at first. But anyway, so I did. I went with him on some, anti-mountaintop removal things. And so then I just became so passionate about it. Wendell was correct in that it was really important for me to do that because I was from a coal mining family. And I understood the complexities of being from a coal mining family, but also witnessing this devastation that was taking place. And so I could speak to the complexities of that. I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years later, Wendell pulled me aside and he said, "You're doing great work, but you need to slow down some." And so again, I learned, 2 really important lessons from him: get to work and be still. And so I did have to sort of pull back for a while and, realize I'm burning out here. It will overtake your life if you're not careful. So, and then you won't be of any use to anybody or the land,
When I was in the Baptist Seminary in Louisville in the late 80s and early 90s, I think everybody that I knew that I admired, they were reading Wendell's novels or his poetry or his essays. And for me, it was his novels that first really allowed me to bless my own roots as a rural person from a small town. You mentioned The Color Purple. Were there other books that allowed you to really kind of bless your roots as a rural person? Was there a writer or a story or a novel that helped you?
So many. I mean, the first one was Lee Smith, her book, Black Mountain Breakdown. I read that when I was in 9th grade, and it was the first time that I saw my people in a novel. They were, not only were they going to the places we went, Cumberland Gap or Pikeville or Knoxville or Johnson City or whatever, but they were also eating soup beans and cornbread, and they were saying, "I reckon." And, it was just the world that I knew, and I didn't know we could write about us. I thought you had to write about New York City or Los Angeles or whatever. That's what the culture teaches you mostly. Then Dorothy Allison, she was writing about, sort of the rough people that I grew up with, the harder parts of that sort of life. Of course, Jayber Crow is, I think, Wendell Berry's best novel. It's one of the most underrated novels in American literature. And it's underrated because it is so rural, and rural literature is always underrated. I already mentioned The Color Purple, which is such a rural celebration as well. And and that's especially important because so many people they don't think Black people exist in rural areas, in rural America. And here she is, presenting this incredible Black rural story. Marilynne Robinson, just the complexity of her rural and small town characters is so beautiful. That whole quartet of books is wonderful. Willa Cather is my touchstone. I don't think you can, if anybody's interested in rural writing, you have to read Willa Cather. And I didn't read her until pretty late. I was in my early 30s before I read her. Thomas Hardy, always. I have some others sitting here. Louise Erdrich. And a recent favorite of mine that I want to recommend is Zorrie by Laird Hunt. It's just one of the most beautiful novels. It's set in Indiana. It's a celebration of rural life, and it's about the extraordinary nature of everyday life, which is something that really interests me. I think that's where the most interesting stories always are, just in everyday, ordinary people's lives. Shakespeare said that the best stories happen in the bedroom, and I think what he meant by that was they happen in the kitchen, on the porch, in the dining room, it's just people's lives.
That's a great list, and I wrote several of those down, especially Zorrie. So 2 years from now, if you and I are talking again and you're passing the mantle of poet laureate onto somebody else in Kentucky, what for you are you feeling called to do right now with this responsibility and this call?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about my platform that I'm getting together. And, you become poet laureate at the end of the school term, so it sort of gives you the summer to get it all together so that when the school term comes in, you'll have it ready to go. Because I think a lot of it should serve young people. But the main thing I really want to do as poet laureate is, growing up, I was always around old people. Not only older people, but really old people. And that was so foundational for me. And so one thing that I'm implementing is a program where I go into classrooms across the state and I work with students, teach them how to take oral histories, teach them how to write like a sort of magazine style feature. And so then I'm going to encourage them to find the older people in their families and their communities, take an oral history for them, write an introduction, and then we'll have probably a website where all those will be accessible, where young people are talking to old people. It's just a way to, for them to have that foundation that so many of us have of being around older people. So that's one of the main ones that I'm excited about. I'm also doing a series of conversations of myself and other writers where we're doing writing lessons. So like one might be on sense of place, one might be on characterization, one might be on plot. And each one of them will be, people will be able to download those. So it's sort of like a podcast, but it's more like downloadable writing lessons. So teachers can use them, but also just somebody who's interested in writing, creative writing, can download them. Those are two of the main ones. I'm also starting to work with the tourism cabinet. I have been to Ireland many times. One thing I love about Ireland is the way it honors its writers. You go to a town and you know what writer is from there. And so I want, if you go to Carlisle, Kentucky, you should know that Barbara Kingsolver is from there. So I want to implement ways to make that more part of our, road signage and just things like that.
With all that you're doing right now, are you able to work on anything, any new writing, any new things coming out?
I just put together a short story collection of stories of mine that have been published over about the last 20 years. Most of the stories that are in it are more recent, but there are a few older ones. So that has just been turned in, and I hope it'll be published. and I'm working on a new novel in my head. I usually work on a novel in my mind for about a year before I ever write anything. I like to think a lot about it, so that I come to the page, you know, ready for it to just pour out of me. The most terrifying thing for me is to come to a blank screen or a blank page and just sit there. If that ever happens, I just freak out, and then I never can write anything. So I have to come loaded for bear, you know.
I think for me, at some point as a preacher, I'm aware that most of my sermons start in the grocery store,
Yep.
right? Because you're encountering people in the world, and you're like, oh, there's God showing up, or there's a question to wrestle with.
Yeah, the most important part of my writing process is walking. I walk, you know, several miles every day, and while I'm walking, the story is coming to me.
Silas, thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
And give my best to Jason, and I hope we get to see you all soon, either in Lexington, or if y'all are down here, come see us in Knoxville.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and hello to Susan and to Jerry Lee. So I keep up with Jerry Lee, the dog, on Instagram. So
he's a great dog. He's spiritual but not religious, but he's a great. And again, thank you for the work you do, and the call to write, with all those wonderful LGBTQ, Appalachian, rural, Christian, faithful man. Thank you for who you are.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and you inspire me, so I appreciate that.
I'm Alex Sharp, and this is Cody Hensley, and together we make Cody and Alex. Today we're going to play a song called Water Me.
Water me, baby, and I promise I will stay. Water me, baby, and I'll love you all my days. Water me, water me, water me. Water me. water me, baby, and I'll love you all my days. Water me, water me, water me. Water me, water me, water me. Water me, and we'll always be together. Promise me my always and forever. Water me, and we will be together. Water me, my always, my always, my always. You're the one.
Hi, I'm Dee Davis. I'm president of Center for Rural Strategies. 11 months ago, there was a catastrophic storm. It dumped over a foot of rain into the southeast corner of Kentucky where we live. Our offices were spared by 4 inches, about the width of a brick, but others were not as fortunate. We thought we would take that moment, and begin to look at the flood, what damage it caused, but also the response, the heroic response in the area. And we did that gathering stories for a documentary called East Kentucky Flood. Since that time, we've continued to get the stories of people in this area. This one is from Rousseau, Kentucky, a volunteer fire department that really stepped up for thousands in need.
Oh, it devastated the community. The water got completely over the roads that it got over completely. This house that we're coming up on here is 2-story. It got in the basement, almost to the top floor. The barn that you see, all you could see was the top of the A of the roof sticking out. The rescue squad was so swamped they couldn't get us a boat, and so actually we called the National Guard, and the National Guard was able to get us, they actually brought in, and we landed 5 choppers, and each chopper had a boat on it, and so that's how we rescued our people. As far as emergency management or anything like that, we never did get a boat that we requested for, but I completely understand that as well. Actually, we did 18 swiftwater rescues, 12 of them being in an upstairs attic and 2-story home. The 12, I could only imagine 12 people being in an upstairs attic, water all around them, and they ain't got nowhere to go. So there was actually a home set right here, a white house, a real nice home. Sat there ever since I was a young boy, and you can see that home is completely gone. And I've actually got pictures of the home. All you could see was the top of the roof sticking out. Flooding ain't, it ain't nothing new around here in the hills of eastern Kentucky. Born and raised here, you see floods all the time, but I believe that they're calling this now a 1,000-year flood, and hopefully we don't never see another one like it. But we need to prepare because we may see another one real soon. I mean, we don't know. As a volunteer fire department in Breathitt County, we said, hey, we've got to help these people. And so, there's long hours, long nights. Sometimes we wouldn't get home 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and get right back up at 6 and do it all over again. And, that's at the time when you put self aside and you worry about your fellow man. And so then it got to a larger scale. We've actually been working with groups out of North Carolina. 98% of our stuff that we've got came from North Carolina. We made a good relationship with them, and So anytime I'd need something, I'd call them and say, hey boys, I need this and I need that, and it'd be just a matter of days and they'd roll it in here to us. And that we're very much appreciative of. And that's been able to get us to do what we've been able to do, because without them we wouldn't have never been able to do it. We delivered 50 days throughout Breathitt County. We had one day that we delivered, we had 16 trucks that was absolutely crown packed of stuff, and we went throughout the county. We even delivered 5,500 hot meals since, during that time. And so, we was busy. We've had high as 200 people come in one day right here to this facility, getting personal items, food, anything that they need. So that, kindly answers your question of what goes on here of a day. It's hectic. Now you'll see here coming up is one of the swinging bridges. You can see the significant damage. They've got a ladder set up to go across it. So the ladder that they've got right now to get up on it, is that swinging bridge safe? No, I can't say that it would be. And the only other option that they've got is going down in the creek and crossing. And usually that can't happen unless you got a four-wheel drive pickup truck. And so going across there is tough. Just because some people is 98, 99% done don't mean everybody is because we've learned that the hard way. Some people is still got mud in their homes, unfortunately, and we're in this 9 months. And so everybody's at a different pace and at a different level. You and I both may have different beliefs and different denominations, and you may believe different than I do, but at the end of the day, we've got to put all that aside and we've got to help our fellow man and our neighbors, and that's what we stepped up to do.
Hey friends, I'm Rachel Parrish with Welcoming America, and I'm so happy to be here to cheer on Rural Assembly everywhere and to celebrate the leadership of rural communities in building places where we can all belong, whether we've just arrived or have been here for generations. Communities where safety is not about fear of them, but strength in us, all of us. All of us, regardless of our race, how we pray, who we love, or whether we were born here or thousands of miles away. Our journeys may be different, but today we are neighbors who can work with intention to be stronger in our connections to one another and to the places we call home. A big, big thanks to Rural Strategies for your critical work to help communities live up to our welcoming values and our potential as places where all of us, including people with immigrant and refugee backgrounds, can thrive and belong together.
It's wonderful to be together at Everywhere. We hope you're enjoying today's programming, and I'm really excited to introduce you to our next segment. Highlander Research and Education Center is a social change organization known for its rich history as a learning community for advancing labor movements, the civil rights movement, and other environmental, economic, and racial justice work. Currently, Highlander is focused on supporting youth leadership development, LGBTQ+, and Black and Brown organizers. The Rural Assembly reached out to Highlander co-directors, Ashley Woodard Henderson and Alan Maxfield Steele, to mine their wisdom about how we overcome barriers to safety and how we build connection, and how we still love and claim our hometowns, even in the face of some of those barriers. This was a full and rich conversation, and we'll share the full version of it later this summer on Everywhere Radio, but please enjoy this shorter segment here.
I think watching what has slowly and intentionally happened in rural contexts in the U.S. South, and I'm sure in a lot of other parts of the country, and I think is a global phenomena, is a divestment of resources and a divestment of intentional resourcing and attention and narrative work and all the different kinds of things that y'all are up to at Rural Assembly, and that I think as ally organizations and friends, Highlander's been up to for a long time as well, around really trusting rural people to know what it is that they need, and also helping folks understand the bigger forces that are impacting the way that rural people and rural communities can survive and thrive. And I think that matters, or that what that ends up looking like for me around safety and healthy and all the different, positive things, generative, thriving. It means that those divestments don't get to happen anymore. It has to be investments.
I think it's sometimes easier for us to talk about what keeps us from safety than it is to talk about what the presence of safety feels like in a rural community. And I just want to be super clear that as oppressive as it is to be a Black lesbian that came up in the working class, that grew up in rural context, is much oppression, white supremacy, Christian nationalism, all the stuff that I experienced, I still find home when I am in rural places. And I just think it's important to say that out loud so that folks don't think that just because we have an assessment of the problem, that we're saying that rural communities in and of themselves are the reason that this country is facing fascist threats, right? I just need to say that out loud. I love being country. I'll also say, just part of what makes me unsafe is that a lot of the resources that should be coming to support me and my family and the families like mine and like yours is that national, state, and local organizations keep talking about having rural programs and platforms, but not actually doing any work with people who are most directly impacted by what it means to be rural, right? Can I talk about it? Can I just tell the truth? Right? How many of y'all have heard like big organizations, whether it's national level or state tables or local orgs that are based in cities, be like, yes, we need a rural strategy. And so we're going to fundraise to make sure that happens. We need to be building coalitions across the urban-rural divide, yada, yada, yada. And then you never see the impact of that work from those orgs. And maybe it's just me. We've really got to reckon with two things that I think make us the most unsafe, if I'm being honest. One is like alienation, the idea of extinction, right? And this lack of belonging across identities in rural America is what's going to kill us, right? There is a significant population of white people in rural and urban communities who feel like they are literally fighting to exist, right? And they are being told by people on the right that if they don't center supremacy, they will cease to exist. And we know that to be a lie from the pits of the hell that I do not believe in, right? That is a lie.
This kind of explosion of this false rural-urban divide has been something I think that Highlanders have been uniquely positioned to do. Like from a rural base, working in contexts that are both rural and urban, or city and country, and bringing folks together to say what is common about our struggle, what is particular about our struggle, what is common about our struggle, and how do we work this out so that we're talking about the new thing that we want to create and invest in rather than the old thing that we inherited and that's killing us.
We've been bringing people together across difference to figure shit out since 1932. That's the secret of the South. That's it. That's what we do. If I was going to add a semicolon to add a little bit more to that sentence, I would say that, through the prioritization of movement accompaniment support, right? We're collecting movement stories and histories and archiving them, as Alan said. We're developing and sharpening methodological approaches, which is basically just how you do what you do, right? And that sort of equation is like, if I do this, this, and this, if I know this, this, and this, if I develop new knowledge with people that I'm different from, but who are also trying to save the world and improve their living conditions, if we together create new knowledge and if we know how to do this, this, and this, then maybe we will successfully continue to improve the way that we live. That's it. That's all it is. That's all we do. We do that over and over and over again for over 90 years. That's it.
This is the work of what it means to be human, is to consistently lean into transformation for fully realizing who we are and what we're capable of, which is more than what we're up against right now. You know what I mean? What we're fully capable of and what we're able to do in terms of as people is more than what we're seeing right now in some of our communities in the rural South and beyond. I think we're capable of more, and I think we ought to give ourselves the credit that we can be not only kinder but more creative, because our imaginations are profound. So we can't let people tell us that they aren't capable of so much more.
You know, I do feel called to it because of my faith practice. You know, I do believe that it is all of our work to not wait for a great by and by, but to build heaven right here where we are, and that's our cost for getting to be in this world. That the great practice of being the most in my faith requires me to be the best, kindest, most loving person I can, which doesn't mean that I don't hold people accountable for their shit. It also means that I can do that with grace, because I get grace and our people deserve grace. So I feel called because of that. I feel called because my people have always struggled for liberation and freedom and justice for all in a multitude of forms, right? Some folks did that through being members of revolutionary organizations like the Black Panther Party, like my mother. Other folks did it through military service because they thought that that was the way. And then they realized that militarism didn't get them any freer. It didn't make them any safer, right? So it's been across the political spectrum of interventions, but my people have always done it. And that makes it also my responsibility to make sure that future generations in my family don't have to do it, right? As little as possible, right? That's my call. That's my responsibility, right? But I also think there's just, you know, and I think there's all sorts of flowery things that I can say to preach you up about it, around like the benefit of collective, you know, engagement in lowercase d democracy, right? That we all live better when you know, I can tell you the Fannie Lou Hamer quote that none of us are free until all of us are free, and all that. And I believe it. But I also just want to be free. Me, Ashley, right? I like winning, right? I like winning justice and freedom and liberation for myself, right? I would love to never have to do this again, right? I would love to not have to be an expert about how people suffer in rural communities. I would love that, because I would love if suffering didn't exist anymore for us, right? So I think you should know that, like, as hard as it is to walk in this calling, it's scary, right? They burn down our office, right? You have to navigate human emotions inside and outside of your organizations, and people are tired and exhausted and ripping each other apart. We're learning how to be humans with each other again. All that stuff is true. It's not sexy all the time. The benefit of what you will get out of saying yes to a call to build a better world, I promise you, will be worth all the bull. I promise you. I promise you.
Hi, I'm Anya Slepian, a reporter with the Daily Yonder. On June 5th, 1902, a 28-year-old Black man named Wiley Ginn was lynched in Wise County, Virginia. More than 120 years later, Wise County residents gathered to dedicate a historical marker memorializing his murder. This community ceremony was part of a national movement spearheaded by the nonprofit Equal Justice Initiative to recognize and commemorate America's history of racial terror. More than 4,000 African Americans were lynched between the end of Reconstruction and World War II. The majority of these lynchings took place in communities that are considered rural today, but until recently, this violent history has gone largely unacknowledged. Today, more than 300 communities across the United States are working with the Equal Justice Initiative to erect markers in honor of victims of racial terror. This video shows a dedication ceremony in Abbeville, South Carolina.
My great-great-grandfather, Anthony Crawford, had an altercation at a store with a white storekeeper about the price of his cottonseed. Grandpa refused to do business with him and was arrested, and then was lynched in a spectacle, ritualistic killing at the town square in Abbeville, South Carolina, 100 years ago.
WKCLA, Abbeville, Greenwood, 92.9 FM.
A lot of people don't talk about the lynchings in their family, and some of us do. For those of us who do, we represent a whole slew of people who are so traumatized that they can't speak, that their relatives did not pass down this history to them. So the Crawfords have always felt, I think, an obligation to speak up for Grandpa Crawford. We were all socialized that way.
No more of this. This violence must cease. No more of this. No more hanging. No more of this.
Terrorizing the black community, white mobs lynched more than 4,000 black people. 4,000 black people. 4,000 black people in the South between 1877 and 1950, and more than 180 of them were killed in South Carolina. As you witness the bringing of these vessels of soil for holy consecration, may you declare yourself a repairer of the breach, an instrument of reparatory justice that declares never again we are standing on holy ground.
It was moving to stick our hands in that dirt and to look at actual soil that holds many family, too many people's DNA. I think is a powerful way of symbolizing the history of lynching in the United States.
And if we start telling the truth about our history, we can actually change the climate for freedom in this country. I don't think slavery ended in 1865. I think it just evolved. It turned into decades of terrorism. We're here today because there was terror in this region. Black people were pulled out of their homes. They were burned alive. They were murdered. They were hung. They were beat. They were shot. And that terror has to be acknowledged.
Exactly.
Yes. This landscape is littered with the iconography of the Confederacy. It is a false story. It is an incomplete story. We're changing that today. And we have to change it because something important happened here. 100 years ago, a man named Anthony Crawford, a strong man, a faithful man, but because he insisted on fairness, a lot of people didn't like that he was doing well. They didn't like that he could sell food and cotton to white merchants. And one day when he was being confronted by someone who wanted to buy his product for less than was fair, they actually arrested him because they couldn't allow a proud, strong, prosperous black man to stand up for fairness. And that wasn't enough. A mob of 300 people came to the jail to pull him out. A trial wasn't going to be good enough. And they took this man out of the jail and they actually dragged his body through this community. And then they took him to a spot, and they weren't content to just beat him. They weren't content to just hang him. They shot his body 200 times. When the family, the grieving family whose descendants are here today, just wanted to reclaim their grandfather, the people in control said, no, we're going to let that body hang there for a few days, just as a statement to all the black people in this region. And that family had to flee, and it was an injury. It was a burden. It was an assault. And today we are here to give voice to that hardship. But more than that, we are here to give witness to the importance of what can happen when we come together and say, I'm here. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do to be truth tellers, to be witnesses for justice, is to gather in a place like this and say, I'm here. This marker is a story about hardship. It is a story about bruising and cutting and suffering. But when we get together, when we say we are here, when we join together in truth-telling, we turn those cuts, those bruises, those scars into medals of honor. This is the most honorable place in Abbeville, South Carolina. We are here!
We were banished. We were ordered out of town. To stand there when everybody was gathered and I could look out in that crowd and think about how many people got in their cars, how many people got on airplanes, to stand at that moment with the Crawford family as we pulled the cover off of history. America is a place where symbols are important, where markers are important.
And that's a beautiful thing.
When you read that text on that marker, it's the truth. And so where he died in an extra-legal murder, we have come back with an answer to that that's permanent. That's a permanent marker. If you go do business in City Hall, if you go do business at the courthouse, you walk right past Anthony Crawford. And he's looking back at you.
My name is Eliza Blue. I'm a writer, folk singer, and shepherd on the short grass prairie of western South Dakota, and I am the artistic director of the Kithship Collective. Kithship, as opposed to kinship, which implies a genetic component, is a relationship built on shared connection to place. Through artisan and artist residencies, hosting workshops, and commissioning works that invite a deeper connection to the grassland ecosystem, we hope to re-story land use specifically in regards to agriculture. The collective has a lot of different projects going right now, but the one closest to my heart is The Grass Widow, a folk opera I'm co-composing with fellow musician John Bakken, that provides a multi-species narrative about the love story between the heroine, a homesteader who has been abandoned by her husband, and the plants, animals, and even the soil of the plains. Titled Every Song's a Love Song Now, this song is the finale of the opera and the moment the Grass Widow realizes not only that she loves the prairie, but that the prairie loves her back. When I found you, I had nothing, nothing, nothing. must die. In a way we are reborn to the sun and to the shore. Every song's a love song now. Every song that sings for you. When I found you, I had nothing, nothing, nothing. Now I have leaves and stems and roots. And I have leaves and stems and roots. And now I have leaves and stems and roots.
Hi, my name is Megan Langley, and I am the founder and executive director of Strengthen ND. At Strengthen ND, we believe in fortifying North Dakota nonprofits and communities. We do this by supporting and accelerating community development through technical assistance, community bridge building, and community solutions facilitation. A critical component of our mission at Strengthen ND is to nourish and cultivate welcoming communities across our state. The vast majority of our state is rural and remote, and residents often remain living within the farming and homesteading culture they grew up in, defined by their ethnic roots. This creates a reticence toward anything or anyone different. At Strengthen ND, we are working to build empathy and create acceptance of newcomers, especially newcomers who look differently than or have backgrounds different from the majority of North Dakotans by rural community members. By highlighting a shared ancestral and or lived experience of immigrating or migrating to a new country or state for opportunity, for example, the past homesteading heritage of many rural North Dakotans and current migrants and immigrants, Strengthen ND will change the narrative around newcomers. Please enjoy this upcoming video highlighting one such example.
Some new residents come much farther than another state.
I'm just curious and wanted to travel a lot, even when I was in college, and eventually that led me here.
After finishing college in Ghana, Barnabas Nayaba wanted to see the world. He visited several countries, including the U.S. 5 years ago, he had the chance to return to the States when he got a green card on a lottery system.
The only friend I had was here in Dickinson, North Dakota, and so I thought, well, why not come here? And you know, with economic opportunities then, there was the oil boom and it was really good. He told me it was easier to get a job here in North Dakota, and I said, yeah, I'm coming up here.
Barnabas's family farms in Ghana, so North Dakota feels like home to him. He works remotely for the Fargo office of WEX, and he's become involved in community activities like coaching soccer.
That small community feel, familiar faces, you know, you see them, you might go to Walmart and you definitely will meet someone that you know. That community I like about it.
Putting down roots in small communities with big opportunities.
And I believe that if you're willing to work, if you're willing to learn and to work, there are opportunities that you can take advantage of.
It's all part of what strengthens North Dakota.
I'm very excited to introduce you to our next conversation. Anderson Clayton is the new chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and at 25 years old is the youngest state party leader in the country. We wanted to talk with Anderson about all the things, what she's learned from visiting rural residents across her state, how she navigates disinformation on social media in her small town, what gives her hope, and why she says it's important to find your people and keep showing up for your community. I kick off this next conversation by asking Anderson what it's like to be a party chair.
The job responsibilities are wide ranging, but it's kind of fun because I always told my mom growing up I wanted a job where I never did the same thing twice in a day. And I feel like that's what I've ended up in a lot of ways, is that there's a new problem or a new thing for me to tackle every day in this. But like a lot of rural residents in North Carolina, actually, I commute for a job now every day. And I commute to Raleigh. I get up every morning and usually either come into Raleigh or I'm driving somewhere to go to an event, to go meet with folks for different meetings. Right now, it's either stakeholder meetings for 2023 municipal elections or talking about 2024 with folks. I do a lot of the interviews and trying to make sure that folks are understanding and hearing the Democratic Party message in all aspects of the state.
And when you go into a community, who are the people you're looking for? Are you looking for, politically active folks? Are you looking for young people? Are you looking for, healers and helpers? Or, who are you after?
I think the way that I really look at it is that right now when I'm coming into a rural area or in any community, I'm just trying to talk to Democrats. I'm trying to introduce myself. I'm trying to give them the platform that I ran on because, I got elected from a body of 600 people, but not all of those included every Democrat throughout the state of North Carolina, right? And I think there's a lot of people in our state that need to hear that there's a new vision and a new message for how we really interact with people going forward and the ways that the Democratic Party plans to engage with folks, and especially in rural North Carolina more than they ever have before. But I also kind of come in and try to listen to and hear what folks want to see and hear from the Democratic Party, because I think there's a lot of times when we say, the Democratic Party has a messaging problem. For me, we've had a showing up problem, and we haven't shown up and listened to people who have really needed our ear.
What have you been hearing? Have you been hearing optimism or real frustration? What does that sound like?
Whitney,
Yeah.
I feel like I've joked with folks. I feel like our party has come back to life over the last 3 months. We've had more folks that have signed up to volunteer, more folks that have signed up to run for office, more people that really understand the stakes, I think, that we're entering into in both 2023 and municipal elections and 2024 in a general election. But I've really also heard a lot of frustrations, right? That this is the first time I've seen someone from the state party in a decade in my county, or, trying to get in touch with me and figure out how we can really reshape and re-energize the county party here. Or, I hear a lot of what's broken, honestly. And I feel sometimes that there's a lot for us to fix. That infrastructure to me takes a lot of time to build. And there's a big question in my mind of, can we do what we need to do by 2024? And no is the answer. It's the short one, really, right? Like, we have a long game and a long-term plan, I think, to build out this model of what the Democratic Party really should be. For me to do that, we really have to convince and I think introduce the idea to people in these communities that we're not just a party that drops in during every election cycle. We're a party of helpers, and we're a party of public servants.
I live in rural Tennessee, and I was even having coffee with a friend of mine who is also a local leader and organizer. And, I told her I was going to get to talk to you. And I said, if you could ask Anderson a question, what would you ask her? And she said, how do we get folks engaged again in civic spaces, in this desire and engender a desire to participate and feel like it's worth something, it's worth their time, it's worth their energy, that there are things that they can do. So how do we energize a base of people?
I really want to bring people into their own power this year and empower folks to feel like I have so much agency and control over what this world that we're living in is destined to be one day. And particularly for young folks, I mentioned that because I think about, a cell phone, right, is one of the worst places I feel like your headspace can exist in right now. If you're looking on TikTok and on Twitter and on Instagram about how like the world is all doom and gloom around you all the time and there's nothing that you can do about it. And I want to pull young people out of that mindset and put in a different mindset of that you have the agency to do something about that. And it's not by sitting on your phone, or maybe it is, it's by digital organizing, or maybe it's by getting a group of people online to get together and say, we're going to go to this meeting and we're going to advocate for this issue. But it's got to be pulling people out of the headspace of that we are powerless.
Yeah. Well, when I think about the theme for this year's Everywhere virtual event, we're focusing on moving towards safer, more connected communities. And, that's kind of a big umbrella for many to talk about many things, many issues. What does safer, more connected conjure up for you when you think about rural?
I mean, I'll be honest, right now in Person County, I think there's, and what I've seen from studies across rural North Carolina and rural America in general is like, at one point in time, it was safe to go to bed, leave your door unlocked at night. And now it's not anymore. And I think about public safety as a really big concern of people in our communities that don't really see rural areas as safe as they once were to them. And I think that for me, it would mean finding a way to create jobs and opportunity for people so that you don't have folks that are, I think, in the situation where they find themselves in of being on the opposite side of that somehow. And that might not make that much sense, but I was thinking about it the other day, Person County's had more like drive-by shootings than we've ever experienced before in these last 2 years from the pandemic. And I'm trying to think about, what are the causations for that, right, in a rural area? And a lot of times that's the lack of job opportunity and mobility. It's the fact that you don't have transportation. It's the fact that you don't have what you need in your everyday life. And so thinking about the things that prevent gun violence in communities and how do we make that a part of the future of rural areas everywhere. I think it's looking at all the life necessities that you need to have, which would mean a place to sleep at night, right? Do you have a job to go home to? Do you have a ability to put food on the table at night? And those issues shouldn't be issues for folks, but they are right now everywhere.
And last question, what sort of advice would you give to other young people or leaders in small towns who feel alone right now, who may feel burned out, who feel like they've been on the front lines for a long time and they've not seen the kind of movement they want to see? How do we keep our own energy levels up?
I'll be honest. I think that I'm so surprised every day that I ended up here. But I keep reminding myself that I ended up here because I believe so deeply in rural communities. And I believe in the ability for them to go forward. I believe so strongly that they should exist 50 years from now. I believe in the type of values that I learned growing up in them. I believe in rural. And I think that that's what keeps me going. And it's the story of that I found that's been connecting me with so many other people that they may live in an urban community now, but they're from a rural area. They've been touched by a rural area in some way. And it's this power building effort that I think we have to do not only across our communities, but also across our state and across our nation. And so if you're feeling alone right now, what I would hope that you would do, and if you're a rural organizer or a rural fighter out there with me, is that reach out to me. Let's get something going, because the thing that I have felt the most empowered by is coming together with folks. And so if you're by yourself right now, that's probably how you're going to feel, is by yourself. And you need to find other people and chase down other folks. And if that doesn't mean it's not in your backyard, that's okay too. But find someone that you can build this movement with you, because it's going to be a long haul that we're going to have to do. I think we got to stick it out together. But feel free to use me for motivation. And I'll give you all the energy that I've got to get out there and give you every pep talk that I've got too, because rural is worth fighting for. It never won't be, no matter where you are.
Anderson Clayton, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you, Whitney. I really appreciate all the work that you do.
In the small, unincorporated coal town of Isom, Kentucky, one family-owned grocery store has for years served a multi-county region. The floodwaters in 2022 inundated the Isom IGA, and the family who owned it, the Kristen family, had to decide whether to go forward. This is our follow-up, the story of their efforts to build back and to build something better.
we go over Highway 15, we turn down on 7, and when we turn down on 7, the shopping center was in a river, actually. It was just covered up with muddy water. Even though you were looking at it, you still couldn't really believe that it was true. I knew then that we were in trouble. I was in shock, and for about a week, I actually walked around in shock, didn't know what I was going to do. I'm 67 years old. The amount of money that we will have to do to reopen that store is going to be about 1.5, almost $2 million. I'd worked for 50 years to get it to that part. We was completely paid for, but I'd prayed all my life that Simon would come in and take the store. He decided, hey, I want to be here. I planned on staying with him for the next 4 or 5 years until this happened, and then I really just had to sit down with Simon and Arthur and say, okay, I think the community needs a store. I think it's a huge inconvenience for them not to have a store. We plan on opening April 1, 2023.
Rebuilding, we really put the community in mind with almost everything. With all of the pictures, a lot of end caps you can see here.
That was your mom?
My mom, yeah. And my brother over there. Hi.
What's your mom's name?
Molly Hope Campbell.
Mr. Malcolm Wilson supplied all of these photos to us. So every photo that you see in here is a product of Mr. Malcolm Wilson. You can see every little detail and so much texture in all these photos. We love the way it turned out. But yeah, Tim, this is the mountain right here behind the store, actually. Malcolm rode up on his four-wheeler and caught a beautiful, beautiful sunset there. It's right here. This little boy, he comes in and shops with us all the time. And Malcolm said the story behind that picture was he had to take about 4 of them because the boy was upset he hadn't sold any eggs that day. So Mr. Malcolm had to buy some eggs off of him. So he finally smiled and we got that picture there.
I've been doing this 50 years and I've exhibited a lot of places, including the first photographer ever to exhibit at the Kennedy Center. This means more to me than anything I've ever done. This is the most important thing to me ever with my work. And this IGA is our home store, so this is the hub of the community in this part of Letcher County, so it's pretty special.
This whole community's been through so much. It's just good to be able to give back a little bit. And, we've been really blessed through this whole situation, and being able, when this first happened, not knowing if we were going to be able to rebuild. And it was like God just put everything into place for us to, come back. And so there was so much community support, too, that this is what we needed to do.
We were so happy to have it back. And it's beautiful.
I'd like to introduce my pal Brady Pinheiro Walkinshaw, who is from rural Washington State, but I guess Brady and I met when he was CEO of GRIS, the climate publication, and now he is the Chief Executive Officer of Earth Alliance. Welcome to the Rural Assembly, Brady.
Thanks, Dee. It's great to be on with you. With Earth Alliance, we're thinking a lot about how is it that we can move and inspire people to act on the climate crisis in different ways. And I think for a long time, there have been narratives about how we solve the climate crisis that have not really empowered us to act. And some of the things that we've been thinking about is how is it that we can move from a sense of doom and gloom to thinking about hope and possibility? How is it that we can think about, for many, many years, so much of the environmental movement was about sacrificing in order to address environmental challenges. We've been thinking, how is it you can move from ideas of sacrifice to ideas of benefit? That there are many ways that life will be different, but people can actually be a lot healthier. And hopefully society can be more equitable as we work to solve the climate crisis. And we've been thinking a lot also about how we move from feelings of powerlessness to ideas of feeling like there's power in our collective and our individual action. An example of that is that I think for a long time with climate change, it's felt like something that has been solved or not solved in halls of government, international organizations, and treaties. And there's been a lot of emphasis, and I think de-emphasis, on the power of individual behaviors and the power of people to take actions in their own lives about how we're living that can help to reduce the impacts of the climate crisis. So we're thinking about all of those questions, and how is it those stories start to show up in media? How do those, for instance, the Daily Yonder and the Center for Rural Strategies does a lot of wonderful work on storytelling and journalism and media. But how is it that we can start to get stories of hope, stories of action, stories of possibility that start to show up in everything from Hollywood to the rural papers that we're consuming? I'll answer to that. And I wanted to say one more comment on the last question, because I think it's a good segue. Is a good friend of mine who's a journalist at the Washington Post, someone named Shannon Osaka, who used to work at Grist, had this great headline come out back when the latest IPCC, the big intergovernmental panel of scientists that release scientific reports on the impact of the climate crisis. She had an article in the Post, and her headline to the article was that climate doomers are the new climate deniers. And I think it's a really interesting idea, right? Because I do think that, and I think as we're thinking about benefits and possibilities in rural communities with things like the Inflation Reduction Act and the federal infrastructure bill, I do think it's important for us to think that these are issues that we can address. There are opportunities here to act. When you think about the federal funding that is coming through the infrastructure package or the IRA, there are so many opportunities for rural economic development that are part of those sources of funds. And I think that's everything from industry. This is just happening in Washington State. It's happening in Ohio right now. It's happening around the country. There are opportunities for clean energy development that are happening in rural areas. As we look at the scale up of wind and solar, so much of that will be sited and developed and permitted in areas that both impact rural communities and hopefully benefit rural communities with employment and jobs. I also, and UD, we're in the middle of such catastrophic flooding in Kentucky. There is a lot more support that I think is also coming for resilience, and thinking about how communities are able to, communities that are vulnerable are better able to invest and prepare for a future that will be different than the one that we live in today. I think that rural communities will be such a pivotal part of solving the climate crisis because of the direct interactions that rural communities have with our natural resources. And I think that the management of water, of timberlands, of agricultural lands, of forest lands, of aquaculture lands, of all the sources of where carbon is conserved, where it's stored, where it's preserved, that is a direct interaction that rural communities have with the sources of production and with the sources of ways that we're capturing and storing and managing carbon cycles that are at the root of the climate crisis. And I think that comes up in many ways. I think it comes up in ways that you've seen rural communities organize and stand up in the face of extraction. Whether that's certain forms of harvesting of timber, whether that's drilling or oil or fossil fuel extraction. I think that you also see a lot of solutions coming out of rural areas. where you have communities that are implementing solutions at scales that aren't at the size of major metropolitan centers. So it is in some ways more easy to imagine a small community establishing energy independence. It's one reason why you've seen so much progress by a lot of tribes and tribal nations in this country who've really sought to develop tribal energy sovereignty through different ways of clean energy. And the last thing I'll say is that water and public utilities have a huge role to play in helping to solve the climate crisis. And a lot of those forms of governance and participation and management of public utilities, a lot of the best models for those actually come from rural areas. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to create cooperatives, different sorts of governance structures, different ways of retaining community ownership of resources and assets that affect how we live and think about a future that is reliant and fueled by clean energy.
Hi, Rural Assembly. My name is Tasha Sams. I'm the Manager of Strategic Projects for Main Street America. Safer, more connected community means a lot of things to me. As a proud member of the LGBTQ+ community, it means seeing myself represented in my community at every level. People do not live in, nor do they invest in communities where they don't see themselves represented or respected. Safer, more connected community means knowing that as someone who is visibly queer, I can walk downtown and not worry about people staring, saying cruel or disrespectful things, or treating me differently just because of who I am. Safer, more connected community means that I am valued in my community for my talents, skill sets, unique expertise, and that community members seek to intentionally include me at development meetings, through programming, and other critical community experiences. Safer, more connected community means uplifting and respecting all elements of my identity and never using who I am as a political weapon to create divisiveness or cause harm in hurtful, degrading ways. Clearly, safer, more connected community means a whole lot to me. And the only way we are going to truly create safe and truly more connected communities is together and making sure that everyone is represented throughout the entirety of that initiative. Thank y'all.
My name is Dominic Fazio. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. I'm located in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, of a population of about 14,000. I am the producer and director and manager for the Catwalk Party, which was the first ever drag show in Fergus Falls, Minnesota.
I guess the reason I signed on for the Catwalk Party was to bring a little bit of the gay community here because I don't get to experience it often.
And I remember hearing about it and being like, no way, like my hometown's doing a drag show in Fergus Falls. And I was like, no way, I gotta check this out, / wanted to be a part of it.
I originally joined at our first Catwalk Party with the intent that I was just gonna help out the one time. I wanted to make sure that kings were represented as well as queens.
When the first drag show happened, I was asked, and then I was closely found out I was pregnant, which I do kind of wish as a king I did the drag show pregnant, because that would have been amazing with a big belly. I wish I would have done it. But I was so happy to start it after I felt more comfortable when my child got older, because I wanted her to, even though she was in a small town and she's going to be raised as a small town, I want her to see that she can be comfortable in her own skin.
The Catwalk Party is really alternative performing arts that tends to center on drag or drag culture. So the Catwalk Party was born out of the Year of Play, which was a springboard for the arts initiative, which was micro funding of $500 to inspire play within the community. And since I have a history of creating niche events for rural Minnesota, it was suggested to me that I create a drag show, and so I did. It started with 5 performers, 4 of them being local. 4 of the performers that started in the show have been in every show since, of which there's been 6. And then there's also a new LGBTQIA2 plus youth group in town that has, they had their first Pride events last year, and so those performers were in that show as well.
I'm originally from Fergus Falls, lived here all my life. Grew up where the early 2000s to the late 2000s were my middle school, high school years. It was kind of, as a queer person, an awkward, shifting time to grow up because it was starting to become more accepted, but at the same time, in these rural spaces, it wasn't even close to being there yet.
And I remember being in high school, going to this LGBT club, and people being like, why would you go to that? Like, that's, no, like, oh my gosh, you're the gay kid in high school, stuff like that. And I remember back then thinking, oh my God, like, this town is never going to get with the program. They're never going to support any of this stuff. It's just going to be a small town mindset. And that was really hard because when I was in high school, I was very expressive. I had ginormous hair, the tightest skinny jeans you will probably ever see in your life. Very that. And so I kind of dealt with a lot of the negativity head on. And that definitely made me think, oh, this town is so behind the times. They're not going to get with it. I need to get out of here.
And thanks to Dom, he really did a good job at knowing that that was needed here. And it really was. I mean, when I moved into town, I came with pink hair. Oh, it was, scandalous when I'd go to the Walmart. But now when I go around, no matter what, people are like, hey, you're Ted Hundy. The people you wouldn't, guess would be that way. And the community has just been so loving.
If you were to see a catwalk party, each performer has their own vibe of what they go for, and they have the freedom to do whatever they'd like. The catwalk party encapsulates humor, community, queer culture, being an ally, celebration, environment, and color.
Very much so, of just supporting this culture and just trying to show, rural residents that you can do whatever you want to do and you can be whatever you want to be and go on stage and have fun.
Community has just been so loving and so passionate and so supportive about it, and it really gives my heart joy because it makes me feel like in these small areas, people like my child are going to be able to grow up, and it doesn't matter who she is, if she is just an ally or if she's part of, the queer community, that she's going to have a home here.
Some people that have come to the shows or have seen my other works have mentioned like, oh, you should go to LA or you should be in the, a metro area. And I appreciate the compliment, but it's also, the truth is that rural America needs what I'm doing. And this is home, and I can't change where home is. I tried when I left high school, but every time I came back to Fergus Falls, I just realized that this is home, and there's no changing that.
Hi, I'm Kim Finney, co-founder of the Rural Youth Catalyst Project, and I'm also a proud member of the LGBTQ community. For Valentine's Day, the Rural Youth Catalyst Project, in collaboration with the Rural Assembly, launched a project entitled Love Notes to Rural LGBTQ Young People. We've had the honor of getting to know and work with LGBTQ+ young people and young people from LGBTQ families who are living in rural communities across the country. And they are amazing. These young adults are all leaders, passionate and informed about rural issues. They want to build a life in rural America, but all too often they have shared that they don't see anyone else in their community that looks like or is welcoming them. And now we've invited 4 powerful, brilliant, courageous, and passionate young adults to read the notes in hopes that they'll land in the earbuds, laptops, cell phones, iPads of another rural young person and let them know just how much they are wanted and loved. I'm honored tonight to introduce our circle of readers and people that I am so incredibly lucky and proud to get to know. Garrett Blaze, Frankie Edwards, Rachel Cole, and Mackenzie Ridgewood. Thank you so much, the four of you, for joining me and sharing the notes this evening.
Hi, my name is Rachel Cool. I identify as queer and non-binary, and I'm from California, Kentucky. We celebrate all the joy and love you bring. Dear rural North Carolina's LGBTQ+ community, you deserve a future that is brimming with opportunity, a life that is overflowing with love, and a community that embraces everything you have to offer. In the words of Glennon Doyle, you are human and your birthright is to remain fully human. So you get to be everything. Loud, quiet, bold, smart, careful, impulsive, creative, joyful, big, angry, curious, ravenous, ambitious. You do not need to shrink. You do not need to hide any part of yourself. We see you for who you are and celebrate all the joy and love you bring to the rural communities you call home. Happy Valentine's Day. You will always have a friend in us. Love, the North Carolina Rural Center.
So I'm Frankie Edwards. I am a gay man from Southwest Virginia. I currently live in Roanoke City in Southwest Virginia. You are not alone. I want you to know you are not alone in the LGBTQ community. Even though you are rural, every facet of life is infiltrated with us. I am a successful physician and live in an extremely conservative community, and it can be done successfully. Stay true to yourself and those you love. Donna Almond.
My name is Mackenzie Ridgewood. I am currently living and was born and raised in Arcata, Eureka, California in Humboldt County. It's pretty rural. I was adopted from here when I was 3 and by 2 lovely women who are my moms and have been since I was 6 days old and I came home, even though I wasn't actually adopted until I was 3. But yes, that is me. You belong. My name is Mariana Story Tuttle, and I'm a research fellow at the University of Minnesota Rural Health Research Center. As part of my work this year, I've gotten to hear some incredible people advancing LGBTQ+ health in their rural towns across America. I just wanted to reach out and tell you that you, yes you, belong in your rural community. You are seen, known, and loved, and you don't have to change an iota of who you are for that to be the case. Your beautiful self is who your community needs, whether you always feel that or not. Thank you for living your truth and being where you are right now. Big hugs from Minnesota, Mariana Story Tuttle.
My name is Garrett Blaze. I'm a queer person from rural Virginia, and I'm talking to y'all today from my family home in Tazewell County in Southwest Virginia. In your corner. My name is Lindsay Hanlon, and I'm from Cheyenne, Wyoming. I grew up away and back to Wyoming before realizing I was asexual and aromantic. I'm in awe every day of the LGBTQ youth in my communities who have found themselves already and who have stood up to everything from indifference to hate in order to tell their own story. I want these kids to know that they are amazing, that they are brave and wonderful, and their hometowns belong to them just as much as they belong to bigots and bullies. I want them to know that they are loved and supported, and that there are many people in their corner, no matter how small their corner of the world is. Best, Lindsay.
Awesome work. Just awesome work. Wow. Well done, everyone.
My name is Tori McDowell and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I work in the music industry doing business management for artists and writers in town, and I'm also an artist myself and a songwriter, and I have music that you can stream anywhere that you stream music, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, anywhere else. So I'm really excited to play a song for you guys today. I have a new EP out recently called Not a Man, which basically kind of chronicles the process that I have experienced over finding my own autonomy, owning who I am, and being proud of that. A big part of that is through my sexuality, but also other areas. So you can download Not a Man anywhere you stream music and listen, and I'm going to play a song that's on that EP for you all called Coming Back to Georgia. In the middle of a crowded room, somehow just seeing you, slow motion, tunnel vision, you take all of my inhibitions, out of nowhere, deja vu, like we already knew, we'd be friends, maybe more, it hurt like hell when you hit the door, come on back to Georgia, promise I'll make it worth it for you. These mountains I call home are calling you. Baby, it's so easy, every second that you're with me. Home's not just a place, it's a feeling only you and me make. So come on back to Georgia. Out of all, I choose you, 'cause no one loves me like you do. You take every care away, doesn't matter what they say. My heart was broken, but you've healed it. This time, baby, your love sealed it. Come on back to Georgia, promise I'll make it worth it for you. These mountains I call home are calling you. Baby, it's so easy, every second that you're with me. Home's not just a place, it's a feeling only you and me make. So come on back to Georgia. And I swear I was made for you. And this pain led me straight to you. Come on back to Georgia, promise I'll make it worth it for you. These mountains I call home are calling you. Baby, it's so easy, every second that you're with me. Home's not just a place, it's a feeling only you and me make. Home's not just a place, it's a feeling only you and me make. So come on back to Georgia. Come on back to Georgia.
Fred Rogers once said, "Imagine what our real neighborhoods would be like if each of us, as a matter of course, shared a kind word with one another."
September 28th to October 4th is Missouri Good Neighbor Week. We encourage you to say a kind word or do a kind act of neighboring in your neighborhood.
Missouri Good Neighbor Week is a great time to share kindness with your neighbors. This year, we set a goal to document 10,000 acts of neighboring in Missouri.
To celebrate, neighbors have written notes to their neighbors, done cleanup work for a neighborhood, shared flowers, or even organized a block party. Get involved in whatever way you can to connect with your neighbors and help us reach our goal.
We also want to encourage you to nominate your most engaged neighbor. All nominees will receive a gift and grand prizes will be awarded.
Go to MissouriGoodNeighborWeek.com to register your act of neighboring or to nominate your most engaged neighbor. Let's make our world and neighborhood a better place, one kind deed at a time.
Thanks so much for spending part of your day with us here at Everywhere.
I hope you've enjoyed all the conversations and videos from friends and neighbors across the country. In a moment, you're going to hear from Sam Schimmel and Jonathan Blair. Sam and Jonathan are co-creators of an ongoing documentary, media, and public engagement initiative. It's called American Creed, Citizen Power. It's a follow-up to the 2018 documentary, American Creed, from Citizen Film. We've talked with Sam and Jonathan before when they joined us for our Connecting Our Heartlands event earlier this year. And we wanted to bring them back to talk more about how they're working to build safer, more connected communities, ask them about the barriers that they face, and get some advice for other young rural community organizers. We start off with 2 quick videos that they've made with Citizen Film, highlighting their communities and the work that they're doing.
I was always told by my aunts and my uncles that we've been here forever and we'll be here forever. You know, if the environment's not healthy, people aren't healthy.
We will be here forever, but the way we are here is changing.
Lasky is in a unique position as an oil and gas producer, timber producer, a fish producer. While we support ourselves economically, we are damaging the place that we live. How do we make money our way so that we can do our things our way?
Sam will be the first Kanaitsi Dena'ina attorney here on our homeland that can fight for our rights.
We need to make sure that our community's values remain intact while we also are moving forward with the larger world.
American ideals, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness should have a foundation of where we come from. We're proud that our ancestors mined coal. But when they start saying this is how much time your industry has left to survive, we've got to do something. In our work study program, we train first-generation college graduates and business leaders. Every single one of us knew what it was like to grow up living paycheck to paycheck. There is no plan B in places like this. I think a major concern in my generation is finding that plan B.
I just want to go back to my hometown and I want to open up a business.
I'd like to open up a heavy equipment rental business would help create a lot more jobs for people who don't get a higher education.
We know that if we intend for this region to survive, young leaders have to step forward.
For this region, for Appalachia, safer and more connected would be more along the lines of security in terms of economics. It would be an economy where you could easily get jobs, more easily succeed without having to leave the region, because the goal here is longevity. It's not that we want people to leave for opportunity. We want people to be able to find that opportunity here and to be able to stay here and to help the region grow and to become more economically secure.
Connection to culture is one that's born through food. Our traditional societies operate around hunting and gathering. When that hunting and gathering is no longer able to take place, those stories can't be translated or exchanged around a table set with native foods. So the first step in addressing the harms that have been done is ensuring that native foods are on the table. When that happens, silent knowledge is unlocked, elders remember teachings, and stories are passed down between generations.
The best thing young people who want to make a difference can do is just, to get rid of that generational stigma that nothing can be fixed here, that there's only one way of life, only one option. Well, that option is clearly almost gone. So, what I always tell people is if I did it, you can do it. I'm no extraordinary person. I'm just a regular old guy just like everybody else here. And through these means of higher education, like this institution and many others, there are ways to improve yourself. And by improving yourself and sticking around, you can save the region.
I'm reminded of three things that were taught to me, that were instilled in me. One is to listen, to never stop listening, to hear all sides, because you really do not know the totality of the situation until you hear from all sides. And if you try and make action that is based only on the hearing of one perspective, it's usually bad action. It's not well weighted and it won't stand the test of time. Know your values. Know what is important to you and fight only for what is important to you. And really do not ever stop fighting for what is important and fighting for those values. And I think lastly is something I remember when I was at Stanford, the president of the Maori University in New Zealand came, and he sat down all of the native students there, and he said, look, being here doesn't do a damn thing for your community back home. You being here does nothing for anybody back home unless you go home. So it's your job to stay here until you're done and then go home. You don't get to leave and go somewhere else. You have to go home. And so I think the really critical, important thing with that is the ability to walk between two worlds. You cannot give up your identity simply to advocate on behalf of it. You must live out your identity and learn how to translate that identity in something that can be understood in other places. That's the job of our generation, and that's probably the job of a lot of our generations after us, is to translate between our native ways of knowing and being and Western ideas. And so become good at that, master that. That requires that you know who you are, and then use that to fight for your values and fight for what's right.
Beyond the Clock is a monthly online gathering that fosters fellowship, shared learning, and community care for rural connectors and cultural workers. Co-hosted by the Department of Public Transformation, Voices for Rural Resilience, and the Rural Assembly, Beyond the Clock invites creative rural rock stars from across the country to share in digital happy hours and learning exchanges that connect and inspire. You are invited to join us on the second Tuesday of each month to grapple with the tensions and celebrate the joys of working in and with rural communities. Come and grab a seat at our virtual table.
People don't think you exist in these places, it's a lot easier for you to be mistreated in these places. It's a lot easier for people to say, well, you chose to live there, so you get what you get. And I found that when you start telling these stories, you start putting your face out there. It's not, I don't say that to say it's easy or that, you should just, it's a given. But when you start really putting faces out there, when you start showing people who's out there, it gets a little bit harder to just, it's a little hard to do horrible things to people in silence, I guess is the easy way to describe it.
To me, that's the core, not having people who live anonymously and transiently, but people who really feel invested in their local area, whatever it may be, that they feel like they have a space and that they belong there and that they're doing something there, or collaborating with a neighbor or someone else there that gives purpose. Because that's the core of happiness to me, is getting up every day and feeling like you have a place in this world and you have something that you're contributing.
If we stop having a dialogue around controversial issues, especially in a safe and controlled environment like a school, where we have curriculum that dictates what we talk about and how we approach issues, and the processes in which we teach these situations like the Holocaust to our children, if we're shutting down that dialogue, we're not giving our children a space to become empathetic human beings and understand perspectives that are not their own. And when you look at our children who are in a rural space, a lot of them are very sheltered in a lot of ways, or they are not exposed to a lot of the things that are happening in the world that maybe more urban children would be exposed to. And we want them to be global citizens. We want them to understand that to be a responsible citizen, they have to understand all of the people who are part of their community.
And the more I talk to Trump voters, and living in Jacksonville, North Carolina, you couldn't not talk to Trump voters. The more I talk to them, the more I recognize that we had far more in common than we did that separated us. And that even positions that I might find difficult to understand, and that's being generous, they came at from often, not always, but often from a position that wasn't born of hatred. And so you start to sort of understand that there is a material reality to these people's lives that has been overlooked by, I think, our politics at large.
The reason I love rural development work so much is because it is so much heart. It is so much about relationships and about people, and how welcoming and open people are once you get to know them, and willing to pull up your sleeves and get work done. And I love that.
I mean, I feel like if you're a rural kid, you don't fully ever leave it, right? Like, it's always home. It really is. There's always that thread that pulls me back into those gravel roads and the cornfields and the people, and going into the county market when we go home and knowing every single person in there and having them ask about how we're doing, how are things up in the big city. So glad to see you home for a little bit.
We had begun playing music with Ukrainians back. We'd begun contact in 2019 and then went to Ukraine for the first time in January 2020. As well as Belarus on that trip. We had been doing this cultural bridge building for 2.5 years before the invasion. And then once the invasion hit, it was obvious that we had a platform with which we could support, brave defenders of Ukrainian sovereignty, which we believe in.
To our friends in Ukraine, thinking about you today, thinking about you every day these days. Remembering those times we came to you before the invasion, when we showed up to Lviv on a winter's day in 2020, sang in each other's languages, joined hands in each other's dances, and proved an international folk alliance wasn't just possible, it was a powerful tool of solidarity. People from different worlds and different backgrounds coming together to celebrate our shared values and prove we're not so different after all, that's a cause worth celebrating. And now, thinking about those times we've come to you after the invasion, with songs for refugees and orphans and soldiers, and duffel bags full of medical supplies for your brave defenders on the front lines, wrapped up in that flag of our state, and signed, "From Ohio with Love." It's grassroots folk support. As far as we see it, culture begins at the grassroots. Folk culture, folk music, it's people's culture, and people's music, rooted in the idea that our voices raised can soften any hardship that we face. And when trouble arrives on the doorstep of our allies, we have to recognize what an alliance really means and show up to help, however possible. Because after all, this isn't just about responding to a crisis, it's about being there for our friends. Since the first week of the war, we've been throwing concerts for you back here in the States. Rooms full of everyday people raising their glasses, shouting Budmo and Slava Ukraini. People are desperate to help, no matter their politics. Everyday Ohioans, they want to help your people. It's made me more proud of where I'm from than I've ever been. It's amazing how in these darkest of times, you can find the greatest in humanity. I think we're coming to realize this is what folk is all about. Folk culture, folk music, and now, a folk campaign. We just wanted to let you know we're with you until the end. We're not going anywhere. No matter how long it takes, our people are with you. Because we're better together. And if we join hands from us in Ohio to you in Ukraine, then our arms are wrapped around the world. From Ohio, with love.
It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Oh, Slava, Slava Ukraini, Slava, Slava Ukraini, Slava, Slava Ukraini. It's a mighty big war that's gotta be won. Then we'll get back together again.
Hi, everybody. I'm Libby Lane, Deputy Director for the Rural Assembly. And as we wrap our event, I just want to express my deep gratitude to all of the speakers, the artists, and each of you in attendance for joining us. I'm so inspired. My cup has been so filled today by all of the spirit and the energy that you've brought to the live chat. So thank you for joining us on that. There's just such a feeling of power in that connection from around the world. Just a really quick note that we'll be sending out a short survey to all of the attendees today, and we'd really appreciate you taking just a few minutes to complete that and share your thoughts with us. I'd like to give my Rural Assembly team a quick shout out for all the time and focus that you've all put into ensuring such a smooth and impactful event experience for everyone. Thank you for being the backbone of our digital gathering today. And finally, I just really wanted to take a moment to invite everyone here to stay connected, to continue to collaborate and work toward building the vibrant, thriving, and inclusive rural communities that we envision. I really do believe that together we have the power to build and nurture safer, more connected communities. Thank you again for your time today, and take care of yourselves and each other.